Ever walked into your garage after a day of sanding and found the floor coated in a fine, gritty film, only to realize the cheap dust collector you grabbed for under $100 barely moved a breath of air? That's the kind of buyer regret that makes anyone pause before hitting Add to Cart on a budget machine. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. When I started looking at dust collectors for my shop, the first thing I asked myself was whether I could trust a 1.5 HP unit to handle both a small table saw and a larger belt sander without choking on the load. The Laguna D-Flux promises a Cyclone design, magnetic quick connect hose, and a few tricks that sound like they were meant for a serious woodworker, not a weekend hobbyist. The question was whether those tricks translate into real-world reliability or just marketing sparkle. The first thing I noticed on unboxing was the magnetic quick connect hose. Most entry-level collectors rely on clamps that can leak or slip when you move the drum around, but Laguna's magnetic latch snaps into place with a firm click. In practice, that means I can pull the hose off, swap to a different tool, and be sure the connection stays sealed without fighting a stubborn clamp. I tested it on a belt sander that throws a lot of fine dust. The seal held, and I didn't have to stop the job to tighten anything. That convenience shows up most when you're switching between a table saw and a router, because you can move the hose in seconds rather than wrestling with a hose clamp each time. The drum itself opens with a quick-release lid that's assisted by an air strut. On a typical 30-minute sanding session, I was constantly opening the drum to empty the bag. The air strut makes the lid pop up with minimal effort, and the bag drops out without having to pull on any cords. It's a small ergonomic win, but after a few hundred uses you'll notice the difference between a lid that needs a tug and one that practically slides out for you. Performance-wise, the non-sparking aluminum impeller is the core of the Cyclone. Aluminum keeps the weight down, and the computer-balanced design means the impeller spins evenly, reducing vibration. In my shop, that translated to a relatively quiet operation for a 1.5 HP motor. I could run the collector while cutting a sheet of plywood and still hear the saw clearly, which is useful when you need to stay aware of tool changes. The motor is paired with a magnetic starter that includes thermal overload protection, so if you accidentally overload the unit by feeding too much dust at once, the starter will shut down before the motor burns out. I triggered that safeguard once by feeding a pile of sanding dust straight into the intake. The collector paused, cooled down, and then restarted once the load lightened. Now, no product is perfect. The biggest hidden trade-off I found is the size of the collection bag. At roughly 30 liters, it holds enough for a few short jobs, but if you're running a long sanding run on a large piece of plywood, you'll need to stop and change the bag every 15-20 minutes. That's not a deal breaker if you're okay with a quick pause, but it does mean the D-Flux leans toward medium duty rather than shop floor wide. Another practical weakness is the power cord length, about 6 feet. For a larger shop with tools placed farther from the outlet, you'll likely need an extension cord, which adds another point of potential wear. Who should buy this? If you're a hobbyist or a small shop woodworker who runs a table saw, a router table, and occasional sanding or planing, the D-Flux hits a sweet spot. It offers enough suction to keep a decent amount of fine dust out of the air. The magnetic hose and quick-release lid make tool changes painless, and the thermal overload protection adds a layer of safety that cheap models often skip. It's also a solid step up if you've been using a shop vacuum as a makeshift collector and are ready for a purpose-built Cyclone without breaking the bank. Who should skip it? If you run a full-time production shop with multiple high-volume machines, you'll probably outgrow the 1.5 HP motor and the 30-liter bag within a few weeks. In that scenario, you'd benefit more from a 3 HP collector with a larger drum and a longer hose line. Also, if you're looking for a truly silent system for a finished room workshop, the D-Flux still produces a low hum that can be audible when you're standing close to the unit. From a value standpoint, the headline specs, 1.5 HP, Cyclone design, magnetic quick connect are solid, but the real money is saved in the little conveniences. The magnetic hose eliminates a common source of leaks, the air strut lid reduces downtime, and the thermal overload protection prevents costly motor failures. Those are features you usually see on higher-priced models, yet Laguna packs them into a unit that sits in the mid-four-figure range. When you factor in the cost of replacing a burnt,